And the Christian life is not behavior modification, but mind transformation. And Paul is saying to the people, you get the mind of Christ. It's not an option. You know, in ancient Rome, when a general would conquer a nation, they would hold this great celebration for the general, and he would be in this elaborate chariot, and he's driving through the town, and everybody's cheering him on, and behind him is all the conquered people, and that was glory in the Roman mind. Let's celebrate who we conquered. This morning, we're going to kick off a series called The Mind of Christ. First sermon of the series is simply titled, Humbled to Serve. Who being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So what is Paul teaching us? He's teaching us the call to have the mind of Christ in verse 6. Not the way we think, but how is Christ thinking? But in verse 5, we see the phrase, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. This word let, here's a challenge with the English language. You read it like, oh, that's cute. But then when you go to read it in the Greek, it's totally different. Because in the Greek, when you see that word let, it's defined as an imperative. Imperative meaning this is a command, it's not a suggestion. And Paul is saying to the people, you get the mind of Christ. It's not an option. You have to have, and he's commanding them, get the mind of Christ. And the Christian life is not behavior modification. Well, I just need to change the way I'm thinking here. I need to change the way I'm, respond. No, it's not behavior modification, but mind transformation, which is what we see in Romans 12. Be transformed by what? Renewing. And the context is unity and humility. And this is what you see in the first 4 verses, where it's talking about our relationship with Jesus Christ and our relationship with one another. It's a context is unity and humility. The mind of Christ is relational, and it shows up in how we treat each other. Maybe that's why God had an experience on I had this experience with a pastor, and I was a staff pastor. Here I am. I'm ordained. You got all the letters and all the education and everything else. And I'm talking to this other pastor who was asking for some. He was asking for some material, whatever. And I'm just having a casual conversation with him. And then all of a sudden, he just comes back and says, "Well, I'm a pastor. I need to lead my church. If you have any other questions, you talk to one of my staff pastors." Wow. I'm sorry to take up your time. And so it shows up, this mind of Christ, this relationship it shows up in how we treat each other. The mind of Christ is not a suggestion, but a command. And if we are commanded to have his mind, what exactly is the mind of Christ? Well, the mind of Christ is marked by humility. Let's take a look at verses 6 through 7. Who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used. Jesus Christ fully knew who he was. That was not the issue. He knew he was fully divine, and he understood he had equality with God. And his true humility is not insecurity, but it's strength under control. He's fully aware. I am divine in nature, but this is what we learn. He emptied himself in verse 7. He said, yes, I know who I am, but I'm emptying myself of that. And the verse says he made himself nothing. It's not in making himself, he didn't subtract his deity. He didn't take away from his divine nature. What he did was he added the human nature, so he can experience who we are and what we go through. You see, he chose servanthood. He chose to come and show the way. He took the form of a servant, the creator, the one who spoke, and which creation was made through him, as it says in Gospel of John chapter 1. Nothing was made without him. He emptied himself of all that and said, I've come to serve. How did he serve? Well, here's one example. In John chapter 13, he has all of his disciples together. And what does he do in that moment? He says, I'm going to wash your feet. Something that was reserved for a servant in the house or even the owner of the house to do in that time period. Jesus, who had emptied himself, got down on his knees and washed the feet of his disciples, demonstrating the greatest act of servanthood. He emptied himself of the divine nature, and he took on human form. You see, the mind of Christ looks for opportunities to serve. And you heard Tony and Tracy this morning, they're talking about the volunteer appreciation banquet, and it's like we were joking in team meeting, well, let's see, who will that be? Well, it'll just be another church service, except we're just going to eat. It's everybody. And it's the mindset they have. So it's the mind of Christ looks for opportunities to serve. And let me pause for a moment. Not just here within these walls. Where are you looking for opportunity outside these walls? Out in society? Where are you looking for opportunity to serve other people who are in need? So how does this work? Well, the mind of Christ is marked by obedience. Verse 8. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. The obedience was voluntary. He's up there and says, I'm going to do this. I will do this. He humbled himself. No one forced him to do this. In John 10:18, he says, hey, listen, I will lay down my life and I will take it up, but nobody's going to take it from me. He chose to be obedient to death on a cross. And obedience was costly. It was not just the death, but it was the cross, the most humiliating and painful execution in the Roman world. And obedience was redemptive. His obedience reversed Adam's disobedience. Paul, in his letter in Romans chapter 5, verse 19, he said, through one man, disobedience came into the world and all became sinners. But at the same time, through one man who was in obedience, brought righteousness and salvation to the world. And that was Jesus Christ on the cross. The mind of Christ chooses obedience over comfort. So what is the end result? Well, let's look at verses 9 through 11, where we learn the mind of Christ is vindicated or justified by exaltation. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place. The exaltation came from the Father in verse 9. And it's God who lifts up the humble. I'm trying to recall in James 4:10, it reads, humble yourselves before the Lord, he will lift you up. But it's the idea that, God, I need you. I can't do this on my own. And when you get to that point in your life and position yourself, you will receive from him and he will pick you up. And the pathway to glory runs through humility. Now, some of you sports fanatics are not going to enjoy me saying this. One of the fascinating things, when Tom Brady was a quarterback of the New England Patriots, you'd have the rookies show up for rookie camp, and the rookies, Tom Brady would go up to that rookie and say, "Hi, I'm Tom Brady." Of course, the rookie's like, "Duh, like I don't know that." But you understand where Tom was coming from? He didn't exalt himself. He went to those rookies like anyone else and said, "Hey, I'm Tom Brady. Nice to meet you." And the pathway to glory runs through humility. The name above every name, Jesus, which means the Lord saves. That's what Jesus means. And he's Lord, which is the declaration of divine authority. You turn to him, he can handle it for you. You just need to trust him. Whether it's your finances, whether it's something physical, whether it's something relational, whatever the world is bringing against you, he's Lord. He'll help you. Then there's the universal recognition in verses 10 through 11, where it says that every knee will bow. Every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. This is universal. And when we read this, it only fulfills what Isaiah spoke of in chapter 45, verse 23. By myself I have sworn, my mouth has uttered in all integrity a word that will not be revoked. Before me every knee will bow, by me every tongue will swear. God honors those who carry the mind of Christ. Let me give you some practical applications for believers. If you're in leadership, lead by serving, not by controlling. Well, how do you lead by serving? That means you go and you meet the needs of those who are working for you. You make sure they have everything they need to accomplish the job that they're required to do. In conflict, choose humility over winning. Have you ever noticed when your ego gets in place and you're having a debate and you're like, "No, I'm right," and it just seems to escalate and escalate and escalate and get hotter and hotter before you know it? Well, instead of trying to win it, how about we just use a little humility? Trust that obedience precedes glory. If you're willing to humble yourself in this moment of suffering, I promise you that at the other end, God is going to lift you up. And it's also in daily life where you ask the question, what would it look like to empty myself here? I don't have to be in the lead. I don't have to be the know-it-all. Just to be empty. And there's something about when you're empty, you got room to fill up, don't you? As I mentioned in the beginning of the message, in ancient Rome, if a general conquered a nation, he would return home to a triumphal parade, and the crowds would shout his name, and following him is all the nation of the people that were conquered. They're in chains and all the wealth and treasures. And that was the way that Rome would do it. That was their idea of glory. But then in reading Philippians 2, we see something different, though. And when it comes to Christ, instead of ascending a throne, Christ laid aside his glory. And instead of gripping the power that he had, he picked up a towel. And instead of crushing his enemies, he died for them. You see, the world says, climb higher and higher. Jesus shows, go lower. Isn't that fascinating? Imagine a king who gets up from his throne. He lays down his crown, walks out to the poorest area of his kingdom. He takes the place of the beggar. He gives it up. Not for a moment, but unto death. That's Philippians 2, my friends. And here's the piercing question for us. Will we fight for a throne, or will we pick up a towel? Which way will you go? Every conflict in church, every strained relationship, every leadership tension comes down to this: who will go lower? The mind of Christ does not demand recognition. It does not protect position. It does not cling to rights. It trusts the Father. And here's the promise. The same passage that shows Christ shows Christ descending, also shows him being exalted. The towel led to the throne. The cross led to the crown. The grave led to his glory. If we choose the towel, God will take care of the throne.